Transformation is a word like disruption. It's edgy, provocative. But what does it actually mean? Priscilla and I have been asked to talk about how to transform an academic career. There are so many colleagues in a really tough space or tough position at the moment. You know, their position may be temporary, transitory. And from this type of environment, how do we configure a research and a teaching plan? Let's work with Professor Priscilla Dunk-West and offer solutions and options. Let's consider how to transform our career. Priscilla, we are so happy to have you back with us after your holidays. You're looking even more glamorous than normal.
I feel very refreshed. Well, it's great to be back.
Well, needless to say, while you've been away, the list of queries from us has expanded. And this week is a really interesting one. It's about transformation in our careers. If things are not going too well at the moment, how do we create change? So my first question is, there's a lot of colleagues, particularly early career colleagues, that really admire you, as they rightly should, and they're trying to develop a track record, but they just can't get research momentum in place because they can't get a stability of work in place. What would you recommend for these colleagues?
Yeah. First of all, it's difficult, right? It's difficult to get a gig, an ongoing gig in universities. It's difficult, and that momentum and stability is something that we often draw from when we're judging people's research careers in the academy, and particularly in the past. I don't know that we do it so much now. We have sort of, in grant applications, you can say, I was doing this and this is an explanation for career interruption or those sorts of things. But some things we still do assume that people have that one job for life, weirdly.
Yeah.
So like PhD completion numbers, for example, if you've moved around a lot, you haven't had time to sort of, work with a load of PhD students. So that's kind of one example of, yes, the kind of legacy of that model of, somebody goes into academia and stays there for life and slowly works their way up. So reject that, I say, and notice it, and recognise that momentum and stability are overemphasised in our contemporary kind of world because they're overrated, because the stability is you. The stability and the consistency and the momentum is holding itself within you. So you're that consistency, right? So it's a job that you might go in and out of, but actually what you're interested in is what you're interested in. And so you hold that interest. So keep that, hold on to that and notice that. And I also think there is an increased awareness of neurodivergence as well. And this idea of consistency is really critiqued in that space because neurodivergent folk can be incredibly inconsistent, fabulously inconsistent, can have bursts of energy and then rest. And this is a beautiful rhythm, right? And so this idea of like, you have to be the same across time is, I think, problematic. So, I put that out there. But I think it is helpful to check in with yourself when you're thinking about momentum. Checking in with yourself, whether it's the end or the start of a year or a time that feels meaningful, and thinking about, where am I going? Where do I want to go? What is my area? What is my contribution? Where do I fit? Asking yourself those questions, I think, periodically means that you're rejecting the power of a job or a contract to dictate to you when you have those check-ins. Does that make sense?
Oh, look, it does. And look, a great friend of mine, I don't know if you ever met him, we've never talked about this, but the late, great Graham Turner died yesterday. Great mate of mine, I met him at in Rockhampton in 1996.
Wow.
Lovely man, in and out of my life, and what a tragedy for Australian higher education. But what's interesting about Graham's career, as you rightly said, is he was at the University of Queensland for, I think, 30 plus years. So that model of academic life it is remarkable and wonderful, but it is so rare, and so that you and I have never had that experience. So that leads to my second question that, we talk about, this research momentum and so forth, but the academic structures are working
Yes.
against us. So how do
Yes.
we use our decision making, as you've said, self-care, but, how can we use the decisions that we make, that we have control over, to create some sort of pathway to achievement
Yeah.
when we haven't got the late great Graham Turner's career and that sort of stability?
Yeah. I think again it comes back to thinking about yourself and reflecting on your professional career or self. Sometimes people see these, the personal self and the professional self as kind of connected together or locked together. But thinking about what it is, what is your area of specialty or specialism? Where do you want to go with that? And what do you want to do? And how does, doing a spot of teaching, for example, how does that interact with it? So setting those big kind of trajectory kind of, drawings or conceptual maps for yourself for short term and medium term and maybe even long term. So sometimes that helps people to think, what do you want? Where do you want to get to? What's the end point? Do you want to be, a vice chancellor? Do you want to be in management? And then stepping it back. What are the steps to get there? The other thing is that I think taking up contracts is often doing pieces of teaching. And if you're teaching, you're having to think about theories, you're having to think about keeping on top of the latest research in a particular area. So really noticing those gaps and being curious about how can this serve my career and what I'm interested in doing. And so really having that reflexive engagement in your teaching practice and seeing that as sitting across your professional identity, but also what you want to do and how it can help you. And the other thing, of course, is to connect with people and to make those relationships, to start building relationships with people across disciplines, across the university, across the sector. I think they are always really helpful.
Oh, you've done something crucial there. And often I've talked about, and you were just in the United Kingdom yourself, but the importance of, you hear the phrase learning-led research a great deal in the United Kingdom. So recognising that if you are in these intense teaching contracts, think about teaching and learning. Think about SOTL, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, great journals there. Scholarship of Supervision, great journals there. And thinking about educational research will just keep things ticking over while you're in that intense experience. I think that's useful too.
Absolutely. And thinking, as you say, identifying the publication places that your thinking can lead to, and whether that's a non-traditional research output,
Yeah.
whether that's a collaborative piece with other researchers. Sometimes people are, I don't know what your experience is with edited books, but it's always my experience that people go, oh, I'm writing a book, can you write a chapter? It's always that sort of tapping someone on the shoulder often. And so if you have those networks, that's helpful because then you go, oh, yes. And so it's also about taking up those opportunities, but giving those to other people. So that sort of connection piece across different institutions and people.
No, you're absolutely right. I apologise for that groan. That groan comes from, I was tapped, what was it now, 4 years ago? And 4 years ago, this is my Death Duel of Feminism piece, and it's coming out in March. It's taken 4 years. So just in terms of your interested in research trajectories,
yes,
book chapters are slow. They are
yes,
slow.
they are. Yes, they are.
Now we need to speak to all our colleagues, so many that listen to this, about temporary and contract posts. How can we make them meaningful in our career? I was lucky. I had two short contracts at the start and then moved into a tenured contract at Murdoch. But they're frightening, those short-term contracts at the start of our career. But I would argue now that's all of us. We're all the precariat now, so we're all in these short-term contracts. But how do you use them and make them meaningful for that career story?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is where we go back to thinking about yourself as the consistency and the contract as being the piece of work that you're doing in the meantime, or you're doing, and that then fits into who you are. So you're doing the teaching. Say you're doing a short-term teaching contract for a particular unit. How do you present that as a story for yourself? How do you incorporate that experience into increasing your knowledge, increasing your skills? How do you talk about that as something helpful? Often I remember when I first started teaching, I had a piece of feedback from the student on one of those awful, those student evaluation of teaching things that said, this person should never teach or never started teaching or something like that. I was absolutely devastated. Oh. This was, decades ago. But I now look and think, my practices were sort of not refined enough, or I missed the mark in terms of pitching material to different students in other ways. And so thinking about, if things aren't going well as if they are going well, having a story about that and how you incorporate that into your learning and then how that feeds back into where you want to go with your career. I think is helpful.
Oh, look, I think that's brilliant. And when I sort of help people on a leadership arc or a leadership trajectory, when I do that work, I talk about how can, render this a story. So give this catastrophic event or this brilliant event a narrative arc, and that's how one plugs into the next stage of one's career. Because when you're in the middle of a horrific event, it's just an event. When you give it movement, it becomes something meaningful.
And it's almost like you step out of the feeling of it, I think, as well. So, you get stuck in the feeling of, that's awful, and it was uncomfortable, and it was hard, and I felt awful, and and if you can step out of that and actually really reflexively engage in that learning or what that contributed to you in terms of your practice, I think that's the place we want to get to. I think
you render it a textual system. Can I say that's the difference between us? Because you taught social work so brilliantly and I taught cultural studies, my lot were pretty maggoted most of the time. So I'd be getting, my teaching learning reviews would be something like, we need more farm animals. So I think they probably dropped a tab. I wish I was joking. They were like, we need more farm animals. So they've dropped a tab of acid on the way in and they've seen cows and then the cows disappeared. Look, last question from me about that narrative, about that story of research excellence. Can you connect up these events? Is there a way to scaffold and show from these little tiny contracts? So you might be teaching a course and that's paying your bills. Is there a way to connect these up, or are they just too disparate now? How would you help people, Priscilla?
I don't think they're disparate. I think think about what is your approach to teaching, or what is your approach to research, or kind of stepping back and being a bit kind of meta about it or something, where you're sort of stepping back and thinking, what do I bring to this? What's my lens? What do I help with, or what do I do, or what can I contribute? And I think, again, this goes back to that idea of traditional academia. So we've got like awards, go for an award if you can. Write a textbook if you're, noticing something about students on the course. And then tell a story about that. What does that contribute to the field? And then, I think it's really important to remain connected to industry as well. So in my area, a lot of people might have a PhD or get a PhD while they're working outside of academia, then come into academia, do bits and pieces of teaching, then go back. And again, this is a perfect example of, you can do other things. It doesn't change the way you see your lenses or your theories or your contribution or your approach. It just is a different context that you can explore those approaches and kind of test them, if you like, and have it and incorporate them into a story. So it may be that you say that you use theoretical ideas in the, in an industrial kind of setting, or in a practice setting, or across different institutions.
So it is coming up with that golden thread, isn't it? The thread that links all these components. So as you've said, and I think that'll change people's lives, you may do all these disparate jobs, but you are you, and you are the star of your own story.
And you're doing those jobs, right? You're doing the jobs.
Yeah.
It's not, they're not jobs that sit, you're not trying to connect across the jobs. The connector is you. I
Is
think you're
you.
right in that metaphor of the thread.
Yeah.
That is that is the connector, and I think that's the way to do it. And I also think it's the way. Also think, I kind of said this before about the connector, but I've been thinking about this lately about. I think there are people who are really good connectors, like people who say, "Oh, have you met such and such?
Yeah.
They're doing research in an area, or have you?" And so be that connector across industry or across those different contracts for people,
Yeah.
but also, get people to connect you to other people. So don't be alone in your contract getting. Build your own kind of network, if you like.
I think that's going to change people's lives, Priscilla, because I think there's that shame, isn't there? There's this notion that everybody is the late great Graham Turner, that everybody's been in these universities for 30 years. Basically, nobody has been in these universities for 30 years, and everybody is piecing together a life and a career. And the gift is sitting in your power, sitting as the central main character in your life, and you make these disparate parts come together.
That's right. Exactly that. Yes. Yes.
You are amazing. Welcome back. I've missed you terribly, and I think you've changed lives as always today. Thank you for being you.
Thank you.